This is one of the best flexibility exercises you can use to stretch your psoas and quad muscles, and in this video we're going to say progressions and strategies to make it work for your flexibility level. When we think about hip flexors flexibility, so the flexibility of your hip, of your leg, of your psoas and of your quad muscles, it's easy to get lost in the myriads of exercises that exist on the web. But what if I told you that there is one exercise you have to do that can fix your psoas and quad flexibility forever? Yes, this exercise exists and it's called the couch stretch. It can help you with your hip and leg flexibility as well as with movements such as squats, front splits, lunges, even handstands. I know some of you may already know this exercise, but in this video I'm going to show you some progressions you surely don't know, and plus I'm going to show you step by step how to start from zero and reach hero flexibility. If you don't know the couch stretch yet instead, this is the video for you. Now guys, before I start, it's important that you understand this exercise has layers from the easiest to the hardest one. I'm going to guide you through the whole progression. Feel free to pick up the exercises and progressions that are most useful for your flexibility level and build it up from there. Let's start with the setup of this exercise. I'm going to use a chair, you can use a wall as well, but make sure that you got a band, a weight and some yoga blocks. First things first, you want to wrap the band around the weight and around your back foot like this, all right? Make sure it's pulling a little. And you want to put the foot against the wall, in this case I'm going to use the chair, and your back knee on top of a yoga block. Now, keep this simple rule in mind. The closer your back knee to the wall, the harder the exercise is gonna get, and vice versa. So adjust the distance according to your flexibility level. I'm gonna keep it midway, all right? Now, with the other leg, you do want to take a lunge forward. If you can't do that, if you don't have the flexibility to do that, and you feel stuck, you're probably putting your back knee too close to the wall. Take it further away. This is the back leg setup for all the variations we're about to see. Now, let's talk about the trajectory of the stretch. According to how we move our hips, we're gonna find a completely different stretch. First variation is the classic couch stretch. In this variation, I want to bring my hips on top of my knees, so I want to press my hips back. Once I have my hips pressed all the way back, then I do want to raise my trunk as well. You can do it gradually using a yoga block or a stick by your side and stopping wherever you feel the stretch. Little by little, you do want to make your way up with your shoulders until you're gonna be having your shoulders on top of your hips and your back knee. Here, in this first variation, you're gonna focus the stretch mostly on your quad muscle because as you can see, I'm flexing my knee all the way and I'm moving my hips back. This stretches the quad because the quad is a muscle that moves the knee and the hip. In this case, I'm moving my hip and my knee maximally at the knee level. And that's why I'm pulling the quad so crazily. An important note, your quad is the biggest hip flexor you got. So if it's tight, it's gonna hold you back, preventing you from gaining more flexibility in your hip flexors like your psoas or adductors. So what I strongly suggest you do, focus on this stretch to start with, all right? Until you're gonna be having your knee, hips and shoulders against the wall. In the first one, we want to move everything up, so hips and shoulders against the wall. In the second one instead, rather than pushing your hips up, you do want to move your hips down. But there is something you have to remember. You gotta keep your shoulders up as you do that. So take a longer lunge with your front knee, like this. Keep your shoulders up and move your hips down, like this. A stick here is really comfortable as it can help you keep your shoulders in the correct place. By moving my hips down, as you can see here, I'm gonna extend my back knee a little. That means that I'm gonna pull my quad less because the knee is extended, and I'm gonna pull my psoas more because I'm gonna extend through the hip more. Can you see the different position? Here, the hip is flat. Here, my leg is moving behind my hip, so the hip is extended, stretching my psoas more. So this second trajectory, hips down, will allow you to stretch your psoas more and your quad less. Remember to keep your shoulders up and push your hips toward your front heel. That's why you do want to take a longer lunge with your front leg. Otherwise, you're going to be staying like this. But this is not correct because as you can see, I'm losing the focus on my hip. In this way, instead, I can better stretch my hip, maintaining my front shin bone approximately perpendicular to the floor. Now it's time to explain to you why I'm keeping the band like that. So, your psoas muscle is a hip external rotator. That means that when you stretch it, it moves your hip like this. Yeah, again, this is external rotation, no stretch in the psoas. This is internal rotation, super stretch in the psoas. When you get into the stretch, as you can see, the band is gonna pull toward the outside and the foot won't move from there, allowing you to get into a proper stretching position without worrying about your back foot, which is going to be pulled out. And that means that if the foot is pulled out, the hip is internally rotated, stretching your psoas more. So yeah, make sure that this band is pulling properly. Now, to our last variation, you may need some more yoga blocks in this case. In this third variation, the concept is simple. So we're using the couch stretch to maximize the stretch on our hip flexors over here, all right? And one way we can do it in an advanced way is by extending your front leg like this. Now guys, the band is gonna be really important here because you're gonna be feeling like, okay, my foot wants to go all the way in, so you need something that pulls your foot out. Here, the concept is this. You want to drive the hips down, rest on some yoga blocks with your front hip, so you want to find your depth. Slide with your front heel and keep your shoulders up. You can help yourself with a yoga block and with your other hand on top of your front knee in order to get into the correct position. Why is this variation more intense than the second one or the first one? Because we are extending the front leg and stretching the hamstrings over there. And you may be thinking, okay, but that's the hamstrings of the front leg, not the back leg's hip flexors. Well, there is an explanation. Your front leg and your back leg are connected to your hips, all right? When you stretch your hamstrings, they move your hips into a position called posterior pelvic tilt. And that posterior pelvic tilt stretches your hip flexors more. So by stretching the hamstrings of the front leg, you're gonna be moving your hips into posterior pelvic tilt more, stretching your back leg's hip flexors more. Little by little, as a way to make progress, you can decrease the height of the yoga blocks under your hips. And as you can see, in its final stage, this exercise is really similar to a front split. It's actually harder than a front split. You do want to take your time, okay? Take your time to get deeper with your hips. Stop wherever you want and where you feel the stretch correctly on your back leg. So we've been seeing the three variations of the couch stretch that will help you achieve terrific hip flexors flexibility. But there is one important detail you gotta pay attention to, which is the position of your hips and lower back. In all the three variations, you gotta move your hips into posterior pelvic tilt. I already told you that, but I want to repeat myself once more. Moving your hips into anterior pelvic tilt shortens your hip flexors, so if you arch your back, you make the exercise easier. Vice versa, if you flatten your lower back, so you pull your tummy in, you flatten the lower back and posterior pelvic tilt your hips, this stretches your hip flexors, so you make the exercise harder and you stretch your hip flexors right. Thus, it doesn't matter the variation, you may be using variation number 1 here, variation 2 here, or variation 3 here, you must try to posterior pelvic tilt as much as possible. You're gonna feel how stronger the stretch is when you flatten your lower back and posterior tilt. Allow me to use the band for another purpose. So the reason why you always wanna keep your shoulders up in every variation is because when you move your shoulders down, as you can see, the tension on your hip flexors decreases. Vice versa, when you move your shoulders up like this, you create tension inside of your hip flexors, so you stretch them more. In every variation, try to posterior pelvic tilt, of course, and move your shoulders up as much as you can to create the best stretching effect in your hip flexors. Now let's talk about progressions. What should you do if you are a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced? For beginners, I recommend starting with variation number 1 and eventually variation number 2 as well. Keep it simple and focus on getting better at variation number 1 until you're gonna be having your shoulders, hips, and knee against the wall. Being an intermediate in this sequence of exercises means that you can touch the wall with your shoulders and with your back in variation number 1. Intermediates can work on variation number 1, 2, and eventually 3. For advanced trainees instead, I got a surprise for you. Yeah, you basically want to move your back knee higher, like this. As you can see here, I'm really working on my hip extension because my knee is getting higher and my hips are getting lower. This is gonna stretch my psoas more. When you extend your front leg, it's gonna work exactly the same, but this time it's gonna be much harder. Remember, in all variations, shoulders up and hips down. For how long should you hold the stretching positions? Beginners, intermediate, advanced, it doesn't matter. I suggest you hold these stretches for at least 15 breaths up to 25 breaths. Every 5 breaths, try to get deeper into the stretch. That means moving your shoulders higher, moving your hips lower in variation number 2 or 3, or posterior pelvic tilt more. Repeat this kind of work 1 to 3 sets per side. If you have a stiffer side, do 1 set more on that side. As easy as that, 3 exercises. I've been using these exercises here to get my front split, to get my hip flexors super stretchy. I can stretch my hip flexors, I can feel that they're really flexible, and all I've been doing is these 3 exercises plus a couple more. Patience, as always, is the name of the game, but this exercise here is the way to go. If you have any questions or doubts for me, remember that you can leave a comment down below. I'm gonna be more than happy to have a chat with you. I do read all the comments, and of course, if you enjoyed today's video, hit that thumb up button. Last but not least, remember that if you want to work on your flexibility, you got the flexibility guy up, which is the Flexibility Netflix. You're gonna find a stretching video course, more than 50 programs to follow for splits, whatever, and bodyweight training enhancement programs as well. You can check it out following the link in the description down below. That said, thank you so much for staying with me in this hot summer day in Italy. I guess you noticed I was sweating like hell, but I hope that you appreciated this video despite that. Thank you so much for staying with me. Have a nice stretch and see you in the next one.
I traveled all the way to Japan in this place of silence and peace to find out the secrets of flexibility training. I'm in this temple right now because here is where I believe it's hidden the secret I'm looking for. You gotta be somewhere around here. What? A book? Nani? Honwa? Secret desu ka? Amazon de kaimasu ka? Oh, so ka. Arigatou gozaimasu. Stretching Modern Flexibility Methods is the complete playbook to master your flexibility, and you can check it out on Amazon right now. Huh? It works! It works!